Start. There it is. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Faces of Future Ready. Here we chat with disruptive thinkers shaping the future of financial operations and to guide and power successful initiatives within the Office of the CFO. Today, our topic focuses on finance transformation. Pausing is poison and why iteration outperforms inertia in finance transformation. Joining us today is Heather Vertin, Director of SAP Services for Clearsulting. Heather leads Clearsulting's SAP practice, helping finance organizations modernize their operations and get the most from their SAP and Blackline investments. With 25 plus years of sales leadership, including executive roles at Blackline, Caribia, if I said that correctly, and First Up, she brings deep expertise in financial transformation, partner ecosystems, and go-to-market strategy. Known for her straight talk, team-first leadership, and fanatical focus on customer outcomes, Heather is a trusted advisor to CFOs and a relentless champion for growth. With this impressive background, Heather brings to this discussion very relevant experience and perspective. I'm sure we'll enjoy learning more from her today. Welcome, Heather, to our episode.
Thanks, Joe. I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Well, thank you. There's a lot to be covered. We have just a bit of time, and I'm very interested because in my situation, especially, we're dealing with the risks of transformation, timing, and how that works out. So in terms of the overall topic, pausing is poison and momentum in finance transformation. If you could, let's just start out with that topic. And if you could kind of give us an overview of your thoughts on the process and what usually works best.
Yeah. So when we first talked about this topic of pausing as poison, I thought it was a great illustration of what's really happening with organizations. So it kind of gives the illusion of safety, right? There's so many things that are going on that finance teams are tasked with, and even organizations. So you could be thinking about what's happening with market conditions in the economy, what other strategic initiatives are coming up. Are you doing ERP upgrades? We had a customer a few years ago. We all know COVID came up. That definitely threw a wrench in everyone's plans. So there's a couple options. One is figuring out, do we put a pause on this and change our direction? But what our thought is that really creates a rippling effect. And so instead of putting a full pause on, the thought is, what can I do to make iterative steps forward? And it can be really tough because as you think of the COVID scenario, right, that threw everyone for a curveball. That's something none of us were used to. And you do have to change some direction that you're taking. But when you look across and think, what can I do to keep moving forward? What can I take one step forward with the finance organization? And what actions can we take that will help us as we're going through these tough times? Hopefully we won't have another COVID. That will be a learning experience, but we know market conditions are continually changing. What can finance do to keep their team moving forward so they can help become a better partner to the business?
So can we dig into that for just a moment? Because from a lot of folks' perspective, and in a lot of situations, people look at finance transformation as an event, and it becomes a significant project to go in a very large stair-step function from here to there. But your comments on what can we do incrementally, can you maybe lay out a couple of examples or help people understand, how we look at those two things differently?
Yeah, for sure. So when we think of finance transformation, we do think of here's the big project. Here's a big, scary project. It's going to take multiple years. How do we get there? What are the resources? Thinking right now for many teams are rolling into budget season, but it doesn't have to be that way. And the vast majority of finance transformations that happen are not the ones that are, make the headlines in the news. They're the ones that are keep putting, I would say, one foot in front of the other, making one step forward. So if you think about what can we do to help with listening to our customers, helping the business, giving those insights, that is helping within the finance transformation space. We want to talk about that buzzword. So if you think about what can I do, what are some of the actions that I can take then it's thinking up, let's look at what we have within the finance team, what they're tasked with, and where can we free up some time so we can look at some more strategic initiatives. I like to think of finance transformation as a very overused buzzword. I feel like efficiency is probably second to that, or maybe tied. And when you look at, probably everyone looks at their LinkedIn, they're going to see that in their feed somewhere, probably those two words. Or if you talk about technology, that is also going to be used of efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. But what do you do with that efficiency? What can you deliver back to the business? So I think when thinking through some of these steps you can take is think through some of those actionable ones, taking small projects on at a time. So if we think about the financial close, I know we were talking about Blackline. If you think through of the account reconciliations that are happening each month with your balance sheet and the substantiation that needs to be done. I've worked with organizations from Fortune 10 to mid-market companies, and the vast majority historically have used every accountant's favorite tool, Excel. And while that is phenomenal, there's lots of risks in there, error prone, not most of the time, not intentional, and just very manual process. So if you think how you can take that process, you can put automation behind it, you can enhance that process. One, you're going to get better outcome from your monthly close. You're also going to have the time now to spend on other initiatives within finance that you can deliver back to the business. So if you think about, you can dive into forecasting and be able to do more forward-looking insights instead of really looking at everything, if you will, in the rear view mirror, and have better precision with those forecasts. You're able to look at what some of your margins, where are those driving some higher costs and need to make some adjustments? What are some that are really excellent examples and you want to repeat that with other customers? So just, there's lots you can do within the financial close and thinking, what are the pieces that I can step? So that's one of them that I think about. Another one within that realm is when you look at those reconciliations, there's ones that are really high volumes of transactions. No accountant goes to school to say, I want to sit in Excel spreadsheets and I want to do manual ticking in time. Right. If there is, I haven't heard of yet. But what can you do to enhance that process? Again, eliminate the errors, get more from efficiency, but then thinking to the people who are behind that, the work that they are doing. Again, what they want, people that are coming out of college, getting into the accounting space, are technology. And so how that becomes attractive to your organization when you're using the latest technology. And I think one of the other things to think about with technology is it can bring that efficiency, but then also opening up the path to how things can be done better and different. So making it so you have a culture of change and you're empowering really everyone within your finance team to think differently. What's a new way to do something? How can we grow? How can we innovate, as opposed to maybe just the leadership levels? So really bringing in that culture so you're continually iterating on your finance transformation, if you will.
Right. So some of the thoughts and concepts you've just passed along, like automating reconciliations and doing and looking at some of the processes, those seem like those might need either software solutions or, again, getting back to the thought of when would be the right time to implement something that now sounds bigger than incremental. How would you suggest the Office of the CFO get started looking at some transformational ideas, both from an incremental standpoint and from making larger jumps to something that's going to require new tools or new financial process automation?
Yeah, I think first of looking at what your process looks like, because everyone's in different spots, right? We see a lot of similarities across organizations, but truly everyone is different. So are you one of the organizations that, some have technology, but they have not utilized it to the best of its capabilities? So looking at what are the processes that you're doing? What is that organization? How is it set up? And then as well as the people that are in, the favorite of Excel and using spreadsheets for that, I think looking at technology is part of the equation, but also looking at the people and process that's in place. So looking at where you're finding, whether it's bottlenecks, where you find areas that could have potential for large risk. And those are certain areas to help pinpoint, to have discussions and say, you know what, this is what we're seeing. There has to be a better way to do this. And then there's obviously people like myself and Clear Salting who can help dive into what we're seeing for some of those trends. But I think we can't go into an organization and say, you need to do A, B, and C, because we have to see how that organization operates first. So really doing that self-reflective piece first is important.
So, and looking at when most people think of financial process transformation, most people think close. Would you say that it extends far beyond that because of the many varied tasks that most finance groups have to tackle throughout the month?
I think it does, because that is something that's very definitive. Every organization focuses on, here's our period end close. But that really spreads a couple things. One, it spreads throughout the month, and it's all of the activity that feeds into that. So everything that's happening with the finance and accounting team really blends into that financial close process. So I think looking at those different functions, what's happening could be within your treasury group, what's happening within your consolidations, what's happening with planning. All of those are a great place to look and see, where could we make a change? And again, not looking for the big bang, big transformation, but where can we make an iterative step that will enable us to keep moving forward?
Is one of the best ways to get started, again, for people who've thought about, everyone in finance has ideas that this has to get better. We have to somehow improve. We have a limited team and increasing amount of workload, especially for companies that are growing rapidly. Would you suggest one of the ways people look at it is to almost step back and map out where we are, what do we have, what are the processes that we need to work on, what may be more easily iterative, and other areas that may require a bit more of a step change?
Yeah, I think so. And I think part of that, when you're stepping back and looking at your current landscape of where you are, it's looking at the people, the skills, also the people of where they want to go with their skills and grow within your organization. And I think maybe thinking of how important is that to the organization's culture.
Right.
There's some that, they want to keep people around. I think there's a few famous organizations out there with the whole return to work. Their leaders were very vocal and said, either come or goodbye, I don't care. Those are not the ones that are going to be concerned on, employee growth within organizations. So if that's important to you, and especially, I think the human capital, the employees are really that game changer within an organization, within finance teams, right? Because you can set processes up, you can set technology up, you can do all of that. But what you want is that thinking person behind the scenes who knows the business, who knows what's happening, who knows what can happen, and have them thinking of, how can we do this different? So I think it's taking that inventory of what you're doing today, but not missing that piece of, where do we want to go with this process, but where do we want to go with these people as well?
Right. So kind of looking back at the topic for today in terms of pausing, what are the reasons, some of the chief reasons that you see as to why people fail to get started, push transformational discussions and efforts off to the future? What are some of the reasons why people do that?
Yeah, so I've seen, as I go through and I work with an organization, first thing I'll do if they're a public company, I'll go look at their 10K, see what's happening, see what initiatives they have. A number of organizations always have things at the forefront that pertain to their customer. So there may be retail organizations that will say in their 10K, hey, we are doing a digital transformation for our customer experience, whether it's for the online, the in-store experience. So there's a transformation happening there. Manufacturing companies are working on supply chain so they can deliver quicker to their customers. Very rarely do you see that there's a finance transformation happening. So just to think of that, of what's putting at the forefront of the organization, finance needs to get in line, essentially. That's kind of the initial thought. Those are some of the things that we're seeing. Also, what I'm seeing a lot right now is ERP upgrades. So when that comes along, people will say, okay, again, finance, sit tight, and I promise we'll get to you. In that particular scenario, I feel for IT who's going through these upgrades, because that is a huge project. So moving from one version, I'm seeing this within SAP, moving to S/4HANA, a huge project that generally affects the broad organization. And so they want to make that move. They want to have as few bumps as possible and then say, finance, we're going to get to you in phase 2. Promise we will. Totally understand that. But then you have a few things that creep up that create complications with that. So I just had an organization, they had spent a few years looking at Blackline and they were excited to move forward with it. And they said, yes, we're excited. We're going to get this new tool that's going to help us so we can work better at this. We're going to free up time so we can dive deeper into the business. And the VP of IT said, I know this is important, but can you please sit and wait till phase 2? And so if you think about, if you're one of those people, you built this up, you've gotten on board, you've convinced people you're ready to go, and then they said sit tight. It's really demoralizing, and people feel, they also begin to feel the doubt of, this was an important project that was important. This was seen as we were taking action. And now if this is getting put off, was it not that important? Do people care about what we need within our part of the organization? And so it starts to creep in on just the morale of the team and how much they trust. And so one part of that, I think that's very important, is that culture. But the other piece is, we've had organizations, they've gone through and they've done some of this transformation as they move in to S/4HANA. And what they found is that twofold. One, they get to free up some resources that can then focus on their S4 move, as opposed to having to bring in additional resources. But more importantly is, you're moving to this new system and you get a fresh perspective of data. So cleaning up your chart of accounts, your company codes. Many times people have data in there that is, frankly, probably a couple decades old and got a little messy. So instead of doing a lift and shift and, okay, we'll get to you in phase 2, promise, there's ways to look at this and leverage it for that move within the ERP. And again, it doesn't have to be, everything, but just taking those small pieces that can free up some time. We had another organization that they, as they were making this move, they're consolidating from multiple ERPs, multiple instances of ERPs. And they said, we're a public company and we want to make sure our financials are correct and accurate. So they implemented SAP's group reporting from the start, because they could keep bringing in data from their different ERPs as they were getting set on S4. But they felt this was important, that what we report to the street, we feel confident in. So again, it was picking a few pieces and say, let's do this. So it was working with, the bigger overall project that can be quite daunting, but also finding some ways forward that benefit, the finance team and get them excited about the move.
Interesting. And it sounds like that effort actually freed up quite a bit of time for the team to start looking at other things. You mentioned legacy data, but also potentially different ways of looking at company information and KPIs to measure performance going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. So couple of points, just kind of getting back to this pause, in looking at some of the, what does it really cost a finance org if they don't move into a transformative phase? What are some examples of ways that that doesn't help the company, or that actually hurts the finance team as they're thinking about, well, we want to get started, but to your point, we're waiting for different, if it's an ERP implementation or even some other change in the business.
Yeah, you look to what those impacts can be. We've talked about the morale, right, and that part of the equation. But I think as well, if you put a pause on, think about the market and everything's still moving forward. Technology's still moving forward. Your competitors are still moving forward. So when you put that pause on, that is just broadening the gap of where you sit within the market, where you are in comparison to your competitors. And then when you are ready to restart or unpause that, then that's time you have to make up. And so how much effort takes getting back to that, if you will, that starting point where you were before you keep forging ahead. So I think it really, people think, pausing, everyone has lots of priorities. So it's totally natural to think, we'll just put a pause on this, we'll come back. But that piece of where are you going to be when you come back? There's going to be another organization that went through this and looked at our record to report process. What are we doing? How can we get better at this? Is it technology? Is it process? Is it a little of both? Again, got the team bought in, everyone's ready to rock and roll, and they put it on pause. And so as they circled back around a few years later, if you think about, they had to go through that activity again. Things can change in 3 years. And so all the time and effort that was wasted from that first initial kind of look at it, and then going through again, and then thinking of the team, wondering, okay, are we really going to do it this time? Do we have different people in different roles now? And so there is just a whole re-education and evaluation that's going to happen, and just kind of restarting those wheels. So while
it's almost like starting over again, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and we know of all the things, you cannot buy more time in life. So wasting that time and having that put, kind of really put to waste is quite invaluable.
So would you also say that if you have processes and you're looking to make transformative improvements, even incrementally, a delay in that just carries on the status quo? And to the extent the team feels either overworked, not getting everything accomplished, things aren't done quickly enough in a process, so it's hard to use the data over a longer period of time. Would you say those are factors as well?
Yeah, they definitely would be. And if you think about, well, if I don't do anything right now because we have other things happening, it's not really a neutral action. Not doing anything is going to have that detrimental effect. And the number of things that you've mentioned. And so I think that's the illusion that people come across, is if I pause this, then we're going to come back to it. We're just going to pick up right where we are. It's not going to spread wider. And so I think that's the interesting about the pausing as poison, is it does, like, it starts to seep in and spread throughout, and really, kind of taint the potential of an organization, as opposed to figuring out, what can I do? Which is my top priority? Which is one piece that could be easy to start with, make a change and better enable the team, and tackle that, and then move on to the, next in line.
Interesting. So let's talk about the type of finance organization that refuses to pause. Look at future orgs that are responding correctly. So what do you think a finance team looks like that's actually taking the action and saying, we're going to start moving forward incrementally, and looking at what opportunities we have for both incremental steps as well as the larger ones?
Yeah, I think when you look at finance organizations that are moving forward, that are not hitting the pause button, then they are going to be your market leaders. If they aren't now, they're going to be shortly, because they are the ones that are going to be continuing to move the business forward. They're going to have the strong culture within their organization, within their finance team, of investing in that finance team. And then I think that leads to that culture of change and wanting to hear from them. How can we do better? How can we progress and really get into that innovation part? I think we all know some of the customers of Blockbuster, BlackBerry, Toys R Us, one of my near and dear favorites from my childhood, where innovation and sticking to where you are today can really become a hindrance. And in those scenarios, quite extreme, but, no longer exist. And so I think it's thinking about those are the market leaders. Those are the ones because they're taking those steps forward.
So in that type of financial organization, obviously the leadership for that type of thought process needs to come from the CFO and come from the top. Where do you think it's appropriate to push the decision making, the input, and the information to make changes? Where do you think that falls within the org? How do you see that both flowing from the leader to the team and from the team upward?
Yeah, so I've seen over decade plus that a great spot for making change, I feel, is the controllership level, because they are closest to what happens, if you will, day to day, and know all of the work that needs to happen to get something done. They know the people better within their team, and they can communicate, generally have the respect and the empowerment to go to their CFO and say, these are changes we need to make. Here's what we think can come from that. And the CFO is a great spot, right? We've come across CFOs who they are change agents and they're leading transformations, but also they may not know everything that goes into how the sausage is being made, if you will. So
Right.
They don't know some of the sentiment that might be across the team. They don't know some of the I had one client a long time ago, they were actually sleeping under their desk during the close because they had a couple hours before they had to come back in. So they said it was better. The CFOs don't always know that that's happening. They would want to know. I believe they would, and they wouldn't want their team doing that. But that's why I think right in that controllership level is a great spot to see what that potential is and to be able to communicate that message.
So do you see that, obviously a good controller, a great controller is one of the best assets for a CFO. Would you say that they also involve their teams to understand what are some of the critical points and how are they understanding the process of their teams for a variety of reasons there?
Yep. Yeah. The best leaders that I see in that role, or really, right, any role that you're in business, is finding out from your team what is happening, what ideas do they have, how could this get better, what are we doing that's great. And so I think if anyone thinks one person has the answer, that would be another big mistake. But really engaging your teams to find out what their experience, what their ideas are, is a great way to leverage that. And I think it also, we're talking about kind of breaking down morale, that builds up morale because they're being listened to. They will come forward with more ideas. But then that also you need to be aware of what action you take with that. Are you going to listen to ideas and then do something with them, or take that, make a list, and then it sits on a file somewhere lost on your laptop there?
Well, that speaks to the concept, of momentum and how you keep morale alive. Can you talk a little bit about keeping the momentum going in a transformation? Because I'm sure there are situations where people see we've accomplished ABC, which is good, but it's not everything that needed to be done. And how you keep that alive so that so the team stays engaged for better change.
Yeah, I think it's that engagement with them and continually asking, what can we do better? So getting feedback from them on how those, will say A, B, and C went, what we can do better, and whatever you have lined up that was going to be D should that be the next one? Has something happened in that time period that has changed, and we think, another change could be more important, and could have a bigger impact instead? So I think really that constant communication in thinking about, this is a journey that is happening. This is not one big project that's happening, we cut off and we're done. But it's an evolution that you need to continue through. And the secret ingredient to everything is communication. So really communicating with the team, and getting their feedback.
Well, it sounds like you mentioned it earlier, setting the culture of transformation, the culture of ever improvement. It sounds like that's a key component of keeping that alive, because if you set the expectation that once we fix X, that's not all that needs to be fixed. Continuously look at everything we're doing.
Yeah, it's going to need to keep going. I used to watch quite a bit of NBA basketball and was a fan of Kobe Bryant, and he had won, amazing basketball player, and had won 5 NBA championships. And he has a great video out there. If you haven't seen it, I'll share it with you. But it talks about going out and getting better each day. And he didn't have a grand plan of, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow on Friday to get to another championship. He went out and said, you want to get better each day, and that's going to add up to each week and then each year. So I think that is a great analogy to think about, of, as finance teams approach it, what can we do to get better, each week as we go through this? Or we're talking about, some perspective on the financial close. What can we be doing to increase that each month, to get a little bit more efficient, to be able to go and give some insights back to the business, as opposed to, let's take a look at this every quarter and see, let's see what happens at the end of the year, but really taking that movement forward each step.
Yeah, that creates the idea of consumable change, because if you put something on the table and says, I want to be the greatest of X, versus every day we consume something, then it sounds like that's I love that analogy from Kobe, because I can be better tomorrow than I am today, even if it's a little bit.
It's attainable.
But it's attainable. It's achievable, and I can see it in front of me, versus, wow, that's a big mountain, and and I don't know if I can climb that mountain. Well, you can take 3 steps in front of you. So
exactly.
That's kind of interesting. So so looking at this idea of transformation, one of the issues that people put on the table is that it frees up time. When people look at creating processes that take less time and that makes more time available, how have you seen people turn that into a measurable impact by doing something differently with that more available time from the team?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things that finance needs to keep in mind as they go through these projects, is figuring out, what can I do with that time? Because giving a general answer of like, hey, we can do more analysis. Okay, you can, but like, what's that going to do for the business? So we've seen where organizations, they can dive deeper into, what can they do with working capital?
Right.
Do some cross bridging with other departments, with operations and HR and supply chain, and finance can really become that glue among those different departments. We talked a little bit about the margins and analysis around there. So I think part is digging in, so what is the good, what is the bad, and what do we want to repeat? And then these are the problems that are costing us more. How can we avoid this? So I think those are some examples of the real impact that finance can make as a business partner, and something that I'd encourage people to look into when you're evaluating, okay, if we have this freed up time, what can we do? What would I want to do with my time to make a bigger impact in my business? Because those are really going to be the drivers. Because everything that happens at an organization, where funds go, it's either increasing revenue, decreasing costs, or decreasing risk. So thinking, how can my actions tie to that in some way? And then you're really going to get more support from the organization.
Interesting. We have a couple of questions from folks who are watching. So Heather, if that's okay,
Sure.
I'll pose one here. So the question is, how would you avoid project fatigue and burnout, especially during very large and lengthy transformation programs? And then the follow-on is also, what are the most valued and undervalued people skills to usher through such large transformation programs?
Yeah, I would say as you go through, and part of it is making up this big project where we're climbing Mount Everest or reaching our championship, is figuring out what are those wins along the way? What are those KPIs that we can hit? Because if you wait until you get to the end, you're going to have that burnout. So I think coming up with milestones along the way is very important. Again, kind of speaking with their team so they understand and giving them feedback of where they've had impact, kind of showing your appreciation to them. They understand this is a longer haul, but this is making a difference at that time. I think recognition goes a long way with people and is very underestimated the impact it can make with that. And then also, I think you talked about the people skills. So what I've always thought is very valuable is finding the person within the organization who leadership is very important, but who is someone in the trenches that is part of this project that will want to be the cheerleader, the person who wants to dive in and teach others and be that leader. So I think that's an excellent skill set to find that. One, it's going to serve your project well. Two, it's going to recognize that individual, show them that they're making an impact, and then help lead them down, I think, their career path of probably where they're headed and help support that. So I think really looking for, those are really underestimated skills, and finding the person who wants to help lead through change. I think a number of projects have people that are brought on. The project managers, there's the team that's working on it, but you need that person who's respected and who wants to help lead others.
Interesting. So one other quick question: when we're looking at transformation within finance, is there a way that you find that financial leaders can communicate their transformative journey to the rest of the business and do it in a language that the rest of the business can understand? Because a lot of times you talk finances to other parts of the company and they're like, what, can you translate that, please?
Yeah.
But how have you seen people communicate that in a way that shows financial transformation success leads to greater success of the business?
Yeah, I think tying it to the impact it makes on the business and talking to those business partners, so those other departments, and partnering with them to say, here's what we've done. How would this best resonate with your team? So again, not thinking that one person has the answer, but really working within those other departments to make sure that they're understanding it, they get the impact. And then I think that helps shape your message more broadly, because it's going to be, whether it's in HR, you're in the operations side, you've vetted this message and you've vetted this impact, and some conversations going back and forth. So the operations people and their speaker and finance speak, and you're kind of meeting on a middle ground. So I think it's really important to have that collaboration within the different departments. But again, not focusing on here's what finance did in this transformation, but here's how it impacted different areas of the business, or ways it can impact different areas of the business.
Do you have any examples, or have you seen where the efforts to improve, again, overused word, transform, but transforming finance in various methods has resulted in either a different or better opinion of the finance team from other parts of the business? Because sometimes people either don't appreciate, don't understand, finance is different than sales, operation, marketing, et cetera.
Yeah. Unfortunately, sometimes they're in the back, but behind the curtain, but the magic really happens there. And so I think when we've seen organizations who have just what you were talking about, that communication of what they're able to do with the business. Because a lot of times, sales, operations, HR, they don't know what finance is doing. They know they do some financials, they take care of the books, and that's that. And so I don't think they think about the analysis part. They don't think of the contribution they can make to other areas of the business, other departments. And so I think that is the important part of the equation, is working with those different departments so then they understand, and then people understand this value of finance, and it's not just a data collection, if you will, but they're really driving, some innovative ideas or helping drive the business forward and growth.
Right. Well, Heather, we appreciate all of your comments. Maybe one last opportunity. If someone's watching this episode and wondering, we need to get started, we've been pausing for a while, what would your message to them be?
I would say click on that play button and turn off the pause and think about, what can I do for it? It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be a huge project, but what can I do to make forward momentum? And as I think we talked about earlier, that momentum is really key. So as soon as you get that snowball rolling, it can build up, but you got to take those first snowflakes together, pack them up, and move forward. So I think just taking away the fear element and moving forward, because there's lots of ways that you can have impact to your finance organization, to the business, by just taking action.
Right. Anything else you'd like to share with us? We the time has gone so quickly and we've covered so much, but just before we wrap up, anything else that you think would be helpful?
The other thing I'd say is not thinking of that transformation as a milestone, thinking of it more as a muscle. So if you stop using a muscle, you lose it. I recently had an occasion, a little surprise surgery that came up, all better now. But what came of that, it said, okay, you cannot exercise, you can't go on walks or anything for 3 weeks. So it was surprising in the short 3-week time how much harder it was, like, to go upstairs. We're talking just daily activities, right? Some of these things. And so when you think of that just in your daily life of 3 weeks, what this impact made, now once 3 weeks passed, I had to get back up to speed again. So the same thing happens with your business, is if you stop transforming, you stop moving forward, then you get stuck. And the momentum that you need to get going again, you're already behind. And now you need to catch up. So I think it's really important to think of it as a muscle. You just got to keep using it. You don't have to be one of the CrossFitters or, one of the bodybuilders or something like that, but you do need to be, keep using it to keep that momentum going and keep your business growing.
I like that analogy. It's muscle, not a milestone. It's repetitively used. And when you say constantly in motion, that means that atrophy becomes a real risk if not continued to be exercised. That's
Exactly.
great. All right. Well, Heather, thank you so much for your time today and for all the perspective and information and knowledge you've shared. I think everyone will appreciate that. I know I certainly have. And we thank you for your time. And for everyone who's watching, we appreciate you joining us. And if you'd like to learn more or reach out to Heather, you can reach Heather Vertin on LinkedIn. And I'm sure she'd be happy to hear from you.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from you. It was great chatting with you, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And for everyone, this is, I guess, a wrap for this episode. And I hope you have a good afternoon. Thanks.
Thanks.